Hey, Joe here from Home Studio Corner. In this video, I'm going to share with you 6 of my favorite tips for getting a great vocal mix.
There we go. That's good.
Tip number 1, fast attack compression. If you like the way the raw vocal sounds, if it already sounds pretty stinking good, and it should if you're doing your job in the recording phase, then what I like to do is not EQ first, but throw a compressor on there first with a fast attack time. And by fast, I mean somewhere in the 1 to 10 millisecond range. A faster attack time, something like an 1176 sort of a sound, is gonna tighten up the vocal, it's gonna grab those initial parts of the voice, it's gonna give it that modern compressed sound that we're all looking for out of a lead vocal. Now, why do the compression before the EQ? Well, sometimes just taking the entire signal and running it through a compressor, stuff happens to the sound. And a lot of times I like what happens. As long as there aren't major issues with the vocal track itself, the compression kind of makes everything better. Then after we've compressed, we can slap an EQ on there to take care of some frequencies to get it to sit better in the mix. Compressing it first, if we like the way it sounds, is a great way to kick off your vocal mix.
The talk of the town, that boy got around, and the powers that be made him disappear.
Tip number 2, clip gain that sucker. Here's what I mean. Sometimes we try to make our compressors do too much work. If you've got a vocal where the first blob of a vocal is really big and the second blob is really small, and so the big one sounds louder than the second one and it doesn't sound right, a lot of folks will reach for their compressor and try to compress it even more to get those two sections to sound roughly the same volume. They'll almost obsessively do it to where they spend 20 minutes trying to find the right amount of compression that doesn't sound too much on the big blob and is enough to make the small blob sound louder. The solution? Just adjust the volume of the blobs. Go in and take the smaller one and visually just increase the size of the blob until it's closer to the surrounding blobs. What ends up happening is you have a nice consistent volume through the track. Now your compressor can do what it's really meant to do, which is to change and alter and enhance the tone of the vocal itself, not fix volume differences.
Sometimes singers sing their words not consistently. Sometimes singers sing their words not consistently.
Tip number 3, and this will only apply to certain styles of music, parallel distortion. Vocals sometimes are just too clean. You record it through a nice microphone, through a nice preamp, and it's just nice and pretty and clean, and I don't like it, because I like vocals to have vibe to them. If you do rock or indie music, or even some country, really anything where the vocalist doesn't need to be super pristine and clear, but you want it to have a little bit of a vibe, a great way to do that is to add some distortion. Now, you don't have to go all the way distorted like he's singing with a microphone plugged into a guitar amp, but you can take the vocal track, duplicate it, add a distortion to the second track, find a cool distorted sound, and then blend the two together. So you still have the clean vocal coming through, we still hear the nice crisp high end, but we're also getting this nice gritty mid-rangey distortion sound that blends in and creates this really cool new vibe.
The talk of the town, that boy got around.
Tip number 4, distorted slapback. If tip number 3 doesn't work for you doing the parallel distortion, then maybe what you need is to use a slapback delay with distortion on it. I'm a big fan of slapback delay. Arguably, I use it too much, but it creates this instant vibe, especially on a nice, soulful, grooving rock track where the vocal has this slapback coming off of it that sounds really cool. The problem is, if the slapback is too clean, it kind of poses the same problem as before. It's distracting and not cool. So one of the things you can do, other than just rolling off the lows and the highs, which is a great thing to try, is actually add distortion to the slapback delay channel and really drive up the gain until it sounds really gross and distorted. Blend that in with the clean vocal and you get this really cool vibe that also has a delay aspect to it.
The talk of the town, that boy got around.
Tip number 5, split the verses and the choruses to separate tracks. If you have a song where you get the verse sounding really good, and then the chorus kicks in and the vocal doesn't sound right anymore, so you start messing with that, and now the chorus sounds good, but then verse 2 comes along and now it doesn't sound good anymore. It's very, very common, and a great solution is to just split them up. put all the verses on one track and all the choruses on another, then you can do different settings for each. Now you may think, oh, that's going to make it sound completely inconsistent. That's actually not true. You're just going to do appropriate settings for each. It might be as simple as a little less compression on the verses and a little more on the choruses. Maybe a little bit brighter EQ for the choruses and a little darker EQ for the verses. It's not going to sound wildly different. You want to make sure it still sounds consistent, but going from one to the next, you're not having to change settings on a single track to get it to sound consistent from start to finish. Verses on one track with their own set of settings, choruses on another track with their own set of settings. It works wonders if you're having problems getting it to sound consistent with everything on one track. And finally, tip number 6, automate effects on certain words. Now this is pretty common, you probably already do this, but in case you don't, it can be really impactful in a song to automate certain effects like reverb or delay to only come on for certain songs. Real quickly, how do you do that? Well, you have a vocal track and you use a send to send that vocal over to a reverb. Then you automate the send on and off, so you automate the mute on the send to only come on certain words on the vocal. So the vocalist can sing 5 words and you have the reverb come on just on the 5th word and it creates this big reverby sound, but just around that word, then the vocal goes on. Sometimes you don't need delay and reverb on the vocal for the entire song. It works and it's really impactful to have it just on specific words.
I'm done with wasting all this time sweating the little things, when the truth is all I need to do.
All right, that wraps up 6 of my favorite vocal mixing tips. If you like this, you'll love my 5-step mixing guide. Check it out at 5stepmix.com. It's a free download. It's a real quick read, and it'll help you establish a system for mixing. So you're not always just randomly doing stuff and hoping that you finish at some point. You have a system for knowing how to start the mix, how the middle of the mix looks, and what the end of the mix looks like. It'll really help you. Check it out at 5stepmix.com. Thanks for watching. See ya.